My name is Judith Pucci, and I'm welcoming you to We Were There, a production of the 9/11 Tribute Center. I am one of many Tribute Center walking tour guides. This afternoon, you're going to be hearing stories told to you by two of my fellow guides. These stories go beyond the historic events of September 11th, the events that we all know very well and that touched and changed all of our lives. Instead, they explore the personal costs of that day. Next to me are Cathy Langford and Brenda Berkman. Brenda, who's way at the end down there, Brenda is a now retired New York City firefighter. She served the city for 25 years, and when she retired, she had the rank of captain. Brenda is the reason why it is no longer accurate in New York City to use the term firemen. In 1982, Brenda won the right for women to become members of the New York City Fire Department. Cathy has lived, Cathy in 2001 was living and working down here in Lower Manhattan. Her apartment was just across the highway that way. So she lived about 2 blocks from the Trade Center, and she worked about 3 blocks from the Trade Center?
Probably more like one.
1 block, okay. She was right there. We're going to begin with Brenda's story. So I'm going to very briefly set the scene for you. On September 11th, Brenda was off duty. But like firefighters and police officers from around the city, once the attacks began and once they learned what was happening, they and she made their way here to the Trade Center. And I'm going to let Brenda take it from there.
Thank you very much for coming today to hear our stories. I know that a lot of you are from different states, maybe even different countries in this audience, and you were watching the events of the Trade Center, if you were old enough in those days, live on television. 1/3 of the entire world was watching the World Trade Center unfold on television. And as Judith mentioned, on 9/11/2001, I was off duty. I was at my apartment out in Brooklyn when I got a telephone call from Kentucky. Now, if you know U.S. geography, Kentucky is nowhere near New York City. My friend said to me, "Turn on your television." And this was at 9 o'clock in the morning. It was the first inkling I had that anything was going on at the Trade Center. So I turn on my television, and I see the North Tower burning. Now, the news commentators were initially saying, must have been a small plane or a helicopter that crashed into the North Tower, because we had accidents involving small planes and helicopters. But I looked at the Trade Center burning, the North Tower, and I knew immediately it had to have been a large plane. And that could only mean one thing. That could mean terrorism. So I leave my apartment, and to make a long story short, I end up in a van with a bunch of other off-duty firefighters. We're crossing the Brooklyn Bridge. We had basically no gear or equipment with them. I'd borrowed a set of gear from a firefighter. We'd stopped in a firehouse, and I'd picked out a set of gear that was about my size and put it on. As we're going across the Brooklyn Bridge, basically, it's rush hour, and there's 8 lanes of traffic. And the 4 lanes coming in that we were taking in our little van, the half dozen of us, normally that would be bumper to bumper that time of day, but we were the only vehicle on the bridge when we started across. And as we looked across to the other 4 lanes of traffic, there were 4 lanes of people, many of them covered in dust, spanning the whole length of the bridge. They were fleeing Lower Manhattan, trying to get to safety in Brooklyn, where they were met by their Brooklyn neighbors who handed them a bottle of water or took them home or took them to their homes or did whatever needed to be done. Everybody stepped up that day. Now, we had watched the South Tower, the first tower to fall, collapse on television in the firehouse as we were getting ready to go. As we're crossing the Brooklyn Bridge, just as we get to the Manhattan side of the bridge, we hear this enormous roar. We didn't see, we heard the North Tower fall down. And our little van is immediately enveloped in this huge cloud of dust. I know you've seen the pictures, looked at the books. We were in this cloud of dust. You couldn't see out of the van, and the police officer who was driving us in the van turned on his windshield wipers. That didn't help. We couldn't see out of the van. We said, stop the van, let us out. Out we hop. Now, we didn't have any breathing apparatus. We didn't have any tools. And we immediately started coughing and rubbing our eyes. And I look, and standing there on Broadway is a fire chief, and he's handing out assignments to officers like myself. So I walk over to him, and I say, Chief, give me an assignment. He says, Brenda, do you have any firefighters with you? Meanwhile, all the folks I'd come over with, they all scattered. And I look, and standing there on Broadway like they're waiting for me are a group of my off-duty firefighters from my firehouse in Chelsea. They didn't have any tools or equipment either. They just had maybe a spare axe, a piece of rope, whatever, but no breathing apparatus, no radios to communicate with. I said, Chief, give us an assignment. We start walking towards the Trade Center. I'd been down here many, many times. I did not recognize what I saw ahead of me. Try and imagine. You've watched it on television. It was worse than my worst nightmare, worse than any science fiction movie or horror picture you could imagine. And you would have thought there would have been people screaming for help. There would have been a lot of noise, people crying out in pain. Nothing. It was like a complete dead zone. There was some explosions of vehicles that were blowing up because their fuel tanks were ignited, but other than that, nothing. And we felt incredibly helpless. When the towers fell down, all the water main in Manhattan broke, and the only water that we had to put on the fire that burned for the next 6 months was water that day that we could take out of the Hudson River. So we started doing what you see people, now you're watching Nepal on television, right? What you see people doing at natural disasters, we were walking around the edge of the debris, the 16-acre debris area. Many of the buildings were still on fire, the smaller ones, and all the surrounding buildings on fire, looking for whoever we could find on the top of the debris pile. Now, initially, we couldn't even stand on the debris pile because it was so hot that it immediately started burning through our fire boots. And we make our way around to the west side where we thought we were going to find our fire truck with equipment on it. We did find a fire truck, but had no equipment on it because it had all been taken off for use and then been destroyed. At that point, both 110-story buildings had fallen down, and we kept working there all day. Everyone forgets that at 5:20 that afternoon, a 47-story building, 7 World Trade Center, fell down because it was on fire from top to bottom. And even though we knew that building was going to fall down, we were in the collapse zone, and we had to run like hell again towards the river to try and get out of that. And honestly, it was purely luck of the draw who was killed and who survived that day. I mean, I honestly thought I was going to die that day, but we had a job to do, and we stayed there, and we did it. When it got dark, about midnight, I decided we've got to go back up to the firehouse and figure out what's going on. And then we came back down early the next morning, and we continued to come down and work down here many days, many weeks. And what's amazing to me is that nobody was killed after 9/11 because it was such an incredibly dangerous site. We were taking enormous risks to try and find people who might still be alive, but the fact of the matter was that if you didn't walk out or get dragged out of the Trade Center on 9/11, you didn't survive the Trade Center. What I want to talk about you to end my presentation is emotional recovery of 9/11. For 5 years after 9/11, almost to the day, September 2006, even though I could have retired before 9/11, I stayed. And work was my way of trying to recover from 9/11. But in 2006, I couldn't work anymore, and I decided to retire. And I was really nervous about that because what was I going to replace work with in terms of my emotional recovery? And so I started volunteering for my church, and I started volunteering for the Tribute Center as a walking tour guide down here. But I also started making art. I'd never been an artist, and I decided, let me try this. If I'm no good at it, then I can always find something else to do. But for 10 years, I did not do anything. 10 years after 9/11, I did not do anything in my art that was related to 9/11. And then 10 years after 9/11, I organized a collaborative art project of a group of artists, 14 of us all together from all over the world, all different kinds of artists, and we did our tribute to the events of 9/11 and the days thereafter. It was part of all of our emotional recovery. And that's what I continue to do today. I continue to do these volunteer activities, and I continue to make my art. Now I'm doing a project called 36 Views of One World Trade Center, the new one. I thank you very much for listening to my story.
For the fire department, when the attacks began, the first attack, in firehouses throughout New York City, the night shift was ending and the day shift was beginning. So you had this overlap. That is why there were so many firefighters in the firehouses and why so many of them were down here so quickly. You had double shifts because whether you were on duty or off, they just got onto a rig and got down here. It was a profoundly horrific day for the New York City Fire Department. 343 of our firefighters died that day. They were not alone. 23 New York City police officers dead. 37 Port Authority police dead. September 11th is the worst loss of first responders in a single event, not in New York City history, in United States history. As first responders were rushing here and in, people who were here, whether they were working or they were residents, were doing the opposite. They were looking for ways to just get away, and Cathy was one of them.
Hi, my name is Cathy, and my September 11th was supposed to be a beautiful day. It was gorgeous weather outside, and I thought it was going to be one of the happiest days of my life. I was going to have a baby. But let me back up. I was 30 years old, and my husband at the time, we were living in the middle of a great American dream story. Guy was from Australia, and I was from Virginia, and we met, fell in love, and we got engaged, and we moved to New York City. And we got a little tiny studio apartment downtown. I worked at Deutsche Bank, he worked at Deloitte, and we decided to live downtown too. So we lived in this tiny studio apartment for 3 years, and if you don't know what a studio apartment is, it's one room. Your bedroom is your living room, and we had one window. So after 3 years of saving our money, we decided we'd get a 2-bedroom apartment, which we did, and we were so proud because it had 17 windows, it was still super close to work, and out of if we looked north, we had this great view of the World Trade Center, which we were so proud of. But by view, I mean, you really kind of looked at like the 40th floor, because to see the top of it, you literally had to stick your head out the window and look up. They were so tall and massive. I was supposed to be at work on September 11th, but the night before I started feeling a little strange, and I realized throughout the night, hey, I think I'm in labor, I'm in early labor. So when we got up that morning, we thought, this is it, today's the day. We're probably gonna have a baby today. So we called in, said we're not in, and we were home. I was in the kitchen of our apartment. I had just made a piece of whole wheat toast, and I remember kind of looking at it, walking away as the butter was melting, when I felt the entire building shake so badly that I thought a bomb had gone off in our building. So I yelled out to Guy, I said, a bomb went off. We looked right outside, and immediately knew it wasn't our building, it was the World Trade Center, and like Brenda said, immediately it was bad. There were people falling through the air, there was glass, there was fire. Right away you knew it was something horrible. So we made a couple phone calls, we took some pictures, which sounds strange, but we thought that was it. And as we were kind of milling around in our apartment, we didn't see the second plane, but we heard the jet engines way too loud, way too close, and then felt the impact of the second plane. And I can tell you, my mind, my body went eerily still And I remember a couple things. I remember Guy said, he said, get dressed. I was still in my pajamas. He said, we're getting out of here. I can still remember the weight of the tears that were coming down my face slowly. So we packed a bag. I don't know why I didn't have a bag already packed. I was probably going to deliver in 2 weeks, but I thought, no, this baby will be late. So we grabbed a backpack, and we threw in a couple things. I remember we grabbed an outfit for the baby. I remember it was white with yellow ducks because I didn't know if I was having a boy or girl. So we threw that in. We grabbed a towel and our childbirth book because I thought, what if we don't make it to the hospital? And we put in a Leatherman or like a pocket knife in case we needed to cut the umbilical cord. So we leave and we get to the lobby and Guy said, okay, let's go. And I said, no way. Like, the lobby felt safe to me. Everything still falling out of the towers from so high up, I was scared to leave. So we waited, and we sort of waited for instruction, and it's only now that I kind of realized that anyone who could give you instruction or guidance was at the World Trade Center helping. Any police officers or firefighters, they were already there. So we're all milling around now with tenants in our lobby, just sort of waiting, when we heard this horrible rumble, what maybe sounds like an avalanche. And I thought, well, okay, our building's been hit and it's coming down. And I remember Guy sort of put his hands over me, and we just sort of chose our last words because I thought, that's it. I waited for something to hit my head. And we didn't really say goodbye, but we said, I said, I love you. And I said, I'm sorry. And then as quick as the rumbling started, it stopped, and everything went pitch black in the lobby, and ash came in, or smoke. The lights went off, and then people started running in covered in ash. And we had no idea what had happened. We didn't think the towers fall. We thought maybe the tip of it burned off. So now we still wait, because now we really know we can't go outside. We wait there for a while until somebody comes in and says, listen, we need to evacuate this building. There could be gas leaks. The building could be unsafe. So we left out on the West Side Highway, and we start to walk out. And no sooner do we step onto the road than we hear the rumbling again. I remember someone yelled, don't look back, just run south. And that's what we did. We just ran. You can't really outrun something coming down that fast, so we hid in a parking garage for a little bit until a police officer kind of motioned for us to come over to her. We found shelter in someone else's apartment where more people were gathered. We put the TV on, and we realized what had gone on. So we waited there again for a little bit more time, and then some paramedics arrived. I don't know how they got down there, but when they showed up, they said, we're here for the pregnant lady, and I remember I raised my hands. I said, that's me. And they took us to Beth Israel Hospital. And at Beth Israel, I remember the doors opened up to the ambulance, and there were all these professionals, doctors and nurses, kind of waiting to help, but there was really no one to help. Most people were just dead. That I could walk out. I almost felt like they were disappointed when we walked out. So I went to that hospital, and the doctor checked me out, and she said, oh, Mrs. Langford, you're going to have a baby today. The baby's not in distress. You can stay here if you want. But I remember thinking, I'm in distress. And I waited there, and she said, you can stay here and have the baby, or since you live downtown and it's being evacuated, you could go to Staten Island or New Jersey. And there I had a moment of clarity, and I thought, I am not having this baby in New Jersey. So finally, Guy is having a conversation now with my doctor, who's on 34th Street, and he says, I know what's happened. We're here at the hospital. Can you get her here? He said, yeah, I can do that. So we just left, and we started walking up. We just walked 17 blocks to NYU Tisch, and it sounds strange, but we stopped and had a glass of wine, which sounds odd, but what else was there to do? I mean, we didn't know. So we checked into the hospital. We did find one of our doctors, Dr. Antoine, in the hallway, just coincidentally, before I'd even checked in. And I remember he gave me an embrace, like a hug, and I remember it just felt like he was saying, I know. On September 12th at 3 a.m., we delivered a healthy baby girl, and we named that baby girl Grace. Let me tell you about Grace. She's 13 years old now. She's taller than me. She's kind, she's compassionate, she's affectionate. She really is a special spirit, and I just want to let you know what a beautiful life she's living. Thank you.